Student Minister Hilary Muhammad, the European Regional Minister of the Honourable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam. I was born in Camberwell, in St. Giles Hospital. I grew up in and around Brixton. I don't like necessarily the term on the streets as such, because my mother was a very strict woman and I wasn't allowed just to be on the streets. You know, I had set times I could go out, but my peers were very strong, influential persons in and around the community, and I spent most of my time with very strong individuals, very influential brothers in the community. And when I was 19, I believe, I was out with a friend one sunny afternoon, and we were listening to some reggae music, and we were driving up to Dulwich to buy a drawer of weed, and we were already smoking a drawer, and we're listening to music. And when the brother arrived at the house where he was going to go and buy the drawer, he put a tape in. You know, traditionally back in the day, whenever you're going to keep somebody in the car for a long time, you just keep the engine running. Not necessarily keep the engine running, keep the ignition on and make sure that they're entertained. But he turned the music off and put in a TDK C90 into the tape deck. And I started hearing a man speak. This was the first time in my life I had heard a man giving a lecture in the presence of others, you know, publicly speaking. Even though it was on cassette, it was clear that he was speaking in a public place. And it was the voice of the Honourable Louis Farrakhan. I had never heard even the name Louis or Farrakhan, you know, or the Nation of Islam prior to hearing him speak on that tape. And I was smoking a spliff as I was listening. And I was being so thoroughly moved by what I was hearing, because the truths were like bullets. They were just so repetitive. And I could feel goose pimples coming over my body because of the effect of what he was saying. And when the brother finally returned back to the car, we continued to listen. And when we were departing, because he was dropping me back to Brixton just from Dulwich, and we were about to separate, and I asked him, can I borrow the tape? And he said, no. Now, here's a man who's just gone to a house, brought some weed for me to smoke, to, you know, destroy my brain cells, but by way of a tape that was going to educate me to be more, you know, intelligent about myself in regards to my expression. He would deny me the tape, and I thought that was staggering. But because he was my elder, I didn't argue with him. I just accepted what he had to say. But I knew I needed to listen to the tape because of the feeling that it was giving me. It almost and literally neutralized the high that I was on from the weed. So I wanted some more of that. So anyway, he refused to give it to me. And I think a week or 2 weeks later, I built up the courage to ask him again, can I borrow the tape? And he was so disdainful. You know, he took the tape and sort of pushed it in my hands and said, you know, just make sure you bring back my tape here, sir. I'm like, damn, I only want to go home and fast speed duplicate. I'll bring it back to you in 90 minutes. Do you understand? But he didn't want me to have it, period. Because I think, and on reflection, I think he knew that I would subscribe to the principles contained within the tape being espoused by the minister, and he would lose a smoking buddy, he would lose a party. You understand, man? Do you understand? And I think that's what he was more afraid of. It was fear, I think, because what he may have feared is what actually did come to pass. I couldn't continue to hang with him doing the things that we were doing after listening to the Honourable Minister Louis Farrakhan's voice on that tape. So in being blessed to hear the minister's voice. And I don't even see it as hearing the minister's voice, because I didn't know who that man was. I heard a voice. I didn't know what he looked like. I actually thought that that it was something from the 60s. I didn't know it was a tape that took place that same year, or a speech that took place that same year. And I attest to the fact, brother, because of the transformation that I undertook, that was God talking to me through Louis Farrakhan. So that generally is my starting point in consciousness, and I've been blessed to continue to stay in the mold of spiritual growth and development, bearing in mind that when I first heard his voice, it was only 90 minutes out of a 3-hour lecture. And because there was no quote-unquote Nation of Islam mosque or group here, I spent 5 years with our Orthodox brothers in the Brixton Mosque. They taught me how to make my rakats and how to fast in the month of Ramadan. And I remember my first Ramadan was in the hottest month of the year. It was in August, I think, at that time, July, August. And the break fast time, the sun wasn't setting until 9 p.m. And I remember when the sun set and the time came, brother, about 9:15, and I had this peg of orange in my hand. And 25 years henceforth, it's still very vivid in my mind, breaking my first fast, you know, as a follower of the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, but being nurtured in an Orthodox mosque in Brixton. And it really was surreal, you know. So the birth of the Nation of Islam, from my perspective, what I experienced here in the UK, I see the birth of the Nation of Islam in 85, around 86, as we look back at the climate in the United Kingdom around that time. There was riots taking place, and black people and others were very dissatisfied with the treatment that were taking place, and people was in a very rebellious mode. They had had enough of being abused and misused, being stopped by the police with for no real reason. And there was high tensions at the time. And it was a time of change. It was a time to recalibrate the relationship between the citizen with law enforcement, and opportunities were askance for blacks at that time. And I was a young boy, and I remember I was looking for a home. I was like a spiritual gypsy, you know, had no place I could call home because there was no Nation of Islam mosque. The Orthodox mosque, I wasn't really fully feeling it, you know, and because outside of prayer, there really wasn't too much. And the Ansarullah community, they had a lovely prayer service and great information, but it never soothed my soul. So I never joined on to that community. After that time, I met a brother who was a good friend of mine. He left England and he became a member of the Nation of Islam in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And he came back to London and we met up, and he had information of some other brothers who were, what he received when he was in America, of other brothers who were followers of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, who was living in the east of London at that time. So when he came, he was hot to do something, you know, and he was a good friend of mine. So we decided that we were going to show the minister's video to our friends. So we hired a room in Balham Library, and we rented the room, had this television, this Sony Trinitron, big heavy TV, and we set it up, and got t-shirts printed called Stop the Killing, duplicated some of the VHS cassettes, and I never forget, bruv, it was just me and him, and we had on suits, and we had about 40 of our friends seated in this library, in this room, watching the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, and we were both standing outside of the double glass doors, and we were discussing, man, the tape's gonna finish in 5 minutes, we need to close it out. And I said to him, you have to do it. And he said, no, I can't do it, you got to do it. And I said to him, bro, I'm not going back in that room. I was scared to death. I was scared to death. Literally scared to death. And by God's grace, I was able to get him to go in and close out the video and invite the people to, you know, look at the merchandise. And we invited them, I think, back the following week to meet at the Bon Marsh. Remember the Bon Marsh on Brixton High Street? It was a building that was dedicated to small black businesses after the riots. And I remember the second week I expected him to go in there and close it out too. And he came on the second week in just jeans and a t-shirt, and I had on a suit. And when I was trying to encourage, he said, I can't do it because I'm dressed like this. So I was forced, you know, by circumstances to go in and close the meeting. And the rest is history, really. We continued on, and the uptake to be a part of the nation, the response was surreal, it was unbelievable. What the nation represents. For me, the Nation of Islam has always represented life over death, light over darkness, you know, energy over apathy. And it has represented for me a lifeline. Because when I look back where my life was going, brother, it was so predictable. Where I was in society, this great teaching gave me an opportunity to open up new fields of endeavor and new fields by which I could actually justify my life. Because we're here, yes, on planet Earth, and we're existing, but I didn't believe I was living. And in meeting the Honorable Louis Farrakhan and in taking on board that which he was saying, I could actually say I started living. My life had a purpose beyond just eating and breathing and reproducing life. So be that as it may, in being blessed to be a part of this great nation, I can actually bring those dreams, those visions into reality. And there's nothing more valuable to me than to be able to make up my mind to do something and know that I have the power from God to achieve whatever I put my mind to do of right. There's nothing I have desired to do of right that I have not been able to achieve, or at least, you know, make a lot of noise or bring a very strong presence to that which I have desired for right. I would go as far to say there's nothing that I've desired of right that I haven't achieved. Nothing. And it's only for me to grow in confidence to desire greater things, because I know the presence and the power of God is amongst humanity today to facilitate us in achieving anything we desire of right. If we decide to manifest his righteous will, there's no force that can stop us from achieving our objective. I know that I am an exemplar of what I'm saying. So I'm trying to grow in courage, grow in strength to desire, you know, more complex things, greater things, so that my life can be of such consequence that I didn't just live and acquire a few things and bequeath them to some children, but actually made a difference, and people are more comfortable, people are more at peace as a result of what I dedicated my life to. So the Nation of Islam, for me, it represents the change that the world needs. The world needs a change to the tyrannical leadership that we've been forced, to endure. Where we're given candidates to lead and to rule us who do not have our best interest at heart, who really are shysters, really, if I can use that term. They're really not good people in and of themselves, and these are traditional leaders, and the Nation of Islam just allows us to cut away all of that cancer out of our lives and just have a fresh, breath of fresh air. Art and culture. I was blessed to be with Jay Electronica in Brooklyn, New York, mid last year, where he was performing. And as a follower of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, he wore one of the official garments of the Nation of Islam, and he was joined on stage with Jay-Z. But what I loved about Jay is the magnetism, the way how he drew people of every ethnicity. And I remember looking at the audience whilst he was rapping conscious lyrics. Black, brown, yellow, white, all singing or rapping along, word for word, what he was saying. I'm talking about they were not just in tune with the words. Their whole body movement, every aspect of their being was in sync with him. And when I looked at that, I saw more clearly the reason why the Honorable Louis Farrakhan never condemns our artists. He always exhorts them to respect the platform that they have, and for them to understand that they really are the greatest teachers that the people have, and the freest teachers that the people have. And the arts and the cultures are so important to the resurrection and rise of the masses of the people that I saw it demonstrated in live and in color that day. And I saw that that's the type of spirit that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan wants his representatives to have. He doesn't want them speaking from a sterile stage and just speaking from a rostrum without any, stickiness and connectivity to the people. That's what he desires, is the connectivity. And that's why I'm a great lover of the arts and the culture. I was blessed to be in Paris and watch Kanye West perform. Again, when you look at the audience, you see a rainbow of people. You see people from every nationality. You see people from every ethnicity, all flowing to the truth that's contained within the lyrics. And that's the message of Farrakhan. It's a message of truth. It's a message of oneness. It's a message of upliftment. And that message is carried and demonstrated very proficiently in the artistic community. We admire those of us in the ministry and those of us who are followers of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. We admire the artistic community in the way how they're able to weave the truth into a song, into a rap, into a play, into some form of expression, so that regardless to what the inclination is of the human being, we can find some way, some means by which we can access that which is universal. So we love art, we love culture, and I thank God for my artistic brothers and sisters, and I thank God for their influence even in the halls of Oxford University, dear brother. Yes, sir. So with that said, I want to thank you for a great afternoon.